So good afternoon and welcome everyone. We're here today as part of MARKETECH APAC's What's Next series. What's Next 2023 is a 4-month-long festival of knowledge sharing activities where we gather top marketing leaders in the industry to share their insights and predictions on the latest marketing trends. Last week, we talked about what's next in event marketing, and today we are thrilled to continue our series with What's Next 2023 Influencer Marketing in APAC today. Influencer marketing is one of the fastest growing marketing channels that we have today, and the creator economy is further flourishing, having its very own ecosystem with players and stakeholders that aim to keep the brand content creator interactivity alive. But as consumer purchase behaviors constantly change, how should marketers respond to this new challenge? So today we will further learn about what we can expect from influencer marketing in 2023 and beyond. Alongside some of the best minds in the industry, we are going to deep dive into the new trends and decode brand expectations as we look at the future of influencer marketing. It is my honor to share the floor with these marketing leaders from top brands in the region for us to help discover the new trends and brand expectations as we look at the future of influencer marketing. So let me introduce you to each one of them. So joining me today are Ruben Ahmed, the Director of Marketing for HP Australia and New Zealand. So hi, Ruben. And of course, we also have Isabel Falco. She's the Chief Digital and Marketing Officer of L'Oreal Philippines.
Hi, Shayna. Hi, everyone.
And we also have Jonathan Gerard, the Head of Production of VaynerMedia for Asia Pacific.
Hi, guys.
Hi, John. And of course, last but not the least, welcoming him back to the floor, Aaron Brooks, the co-founder and president of Vamp.
Oh, guys, I'm back.
Right. So welcome, Ruben, Isabel, John, and Aaron. So I'm just going to jump right into the panel discussion. For my first question, I'd like to focus on co-creation and social strategy. So going beyond just influential content, how does the demand for KOLs move into co-creation and social strategy? So I'd like to throw this question first to Isabel. Isabel, when we actually invited you to be part of the webinar, you immediately shared with us that influencer marketing space is actually one of L'Oreal Philippines' priorities, right? So my question is, what has the demand for KOLs has been like for L'Oreal, and how did you responded to it?
Right. Yeah. So thank you for that question. A lot of the things that Aaron shared in his presentation earlier actually really resonated with what I'm going to share with also today. It was interesting to see in the chat there was one question asking that would you agree rather that influencer marketing has declined over the past few years. That's very interesting for me, and I would actually love to know what industry that came from, because on the beauty side, on beauty and fashion, it's completely the opposite. We're really seeing influencer marketing accelerate and explode over the past couple of years, and so the demand for KOLs has really grown a lot, and it's driven by a few levers, right? So first, the creators themselves. We really do live in a creator economy today, and we see this in force, because on the one hand, content creation has really been democratized by the platforms now. Even the algorithm of a platform like TikTok is really driven by content, and so today anybody can be a creator, and that kind of democratization has multiplied the landscape of content that's available out there. On the other hand, from a consumer standpoint, also we're seeing consumers increasingly looking to creator and KOL content as part of their purchase funnel, right? So they look to creator and KOL content for awareness, for consideration of brands, even conversion now, as we're seeing, so the full funnel, and they look to these content sometimes ahead of branded channels or paid ads. And that has really, those two combined has really exploded the landscape from an influencer standpoint. And the balance is really tipped. Today creators have the power, I should say, and they're not as beholden to brands anymore, because it's their audience, it's their niche, and therefore what brands have to evolve to now, and from a mindset standpoint, is that we need to attract versus demanding from our KOLs and creators more and more. We need to give them a good reason to partner with us, aside from just putting it on paper with a list of deliverables. because as Aaron had mentioned earlier, the love the creators will develop for your brands will also result in, you know, more spontaneous, more evocative and more effective content as well, which at the end of the day benefits everyone. So various incentives that are possible out there. It really depends, you know, how where you are currently on the journey and how big or how small you currently are. But it can range from anywhere from, you know, the normal compensation, but even from for the up and coming content creators, it could be in the form of, you know, even product incentives, as well as inviting them to bespoke creator events where they can have further opportunities to create even more unique content, education, learning about the products, learning about the category, learning about beauty, getting special education, and all of that. What we've also seen, and again, I'm echoing a lot of what Aaron had shared before, is that it's not sufficient anymore to just have, a celebrity KOL or a few mega KOLs and just leave it at that, because it's not just from a scale standpoint, it's also very important from a consumer tribe's relevance standpoint, because it's not just the one who has the highest reach, but it's the ones that have the audiences, and these audiences are very clustered into very specific tribes and passion areas. And so in line with that, we do need more micro influencers and nano influencers, especially since we also see that typically the ones in the lower tiers also tend to have higher engagement rates, because they have the more dedicated following. So for this level of scale, we definitely need the right partners, the right agency partners, the right platform partners, in order to be able to operationalize them at scale. The last point that I'll share in terms of how we've responded is that we've also created bespoke squads for each of our brands, and this we typically do by recruiting up and coming content creators, so that we have a very symbiotic relationship. You know, we give them the broader platform of the brand, and they also are able to so that they have a wider audience. And at the same time, we get bespoke content that doesn't come from a canned brand video, but from real genuine creators. And then they make content regularly for us, which are then published either in their own handles or on the brand handles. So for those in the audience who may or may not be familiar with the L'Oreal brand, so for example, here in the Philippines, we have a Maybelline squad, we have a Garnier gang, we have a L'Oreal Paris Worth It club, we have a Kerastase K club. So those are our squads at the moment.
Yeah, thank you so much for that, Isabel. As I've shared with you, right, I was surprised that actually Maybelline was actually a L'Oreal brand. So speaking with squads, I think this is something that Aaron briefly touched on a while ago in his presentation, and I think, yeah, we agree with that. It's really important that you have to have squads. It's like having your own community of your own influencers, and just being able to collaborate with each other for what's the best content and best strategy to put out for your brands. So I think you really shared a lot of profound insights there. Like, creators now have the power, and that it's very important for brands to attract rather than demand from KOLs. And you also said something about having the right agency partner. So I'd like to move on to John. So hi, John. So
Hi.
Thanks so much for being here. I think you're the representative of the agency side for our panel. So yeah,
No pressure.
Yeah, so my question is, obviously you have a good view of the lay of the land here, right? Because you're on the agency side. So you're not just working on just one brand, but you're working for a number of brands. Yeah, so you're doing this end to end for brands. So my question is, in your experience as head of production, what have been your observation of the top trends this 2022? And what's your forecast as we enter the new year with new trends?
Yeah, well, look, I think, there's a recent survey, right, that most influencers, 83% of influencers regarded their priority when they were looking at brand partnerships as being creative control. And that's a bit of a shift away from the relationship that we had previously between brands, agencies, and influencers, because it's a move away from just amplification and buying access to the influencer's audience. And instead it's, treating them and engaging them as creative partners. So it also means that we need to stop asking influencers to make ads, because fundamentally, look, we all sign up for Netflix, Apple TV, Disney Plus, and pay money so we can actively avoid ads.
Yeah.
And if you look at the TikTokification of sort of social media, it's turned platforms into entertainment channels where people have easier access to actually watch the content they love. They can access it when they choose. This leaves less and less space for ads. Within our attention, there's less space for ads, and especially ads that don't create value for the viewers. So, the interest graph algorithm behind TikTok actually makes it possible for anyone to go viral. So it's regardless of how many followers you have. And that means that you can't just buy attention. You actually have to earn it because it's built around, the quality of the content you create. As an agency, it means instead of just giving influencers scripts or fixed ideas they need to follow, give them inspiration to create content as a creator and treat them as an extension of your creative department. Because fundamentally, we don't understand the audience that influencer has built to the same way they do. They built it, they understand it, they live it. And from a brand perspective, it means that you need to loosen the reins a little bit when it comes to those mandatory elements that you expect, because audience will stay and consume content that of the influencers they follow, but they won't stay and consume ads. And if you're, so create the right thing and you get so much more attention because there's such a big appetite for content and consumption. 40 more people watch TikTok than Netflix, Disney, ESPN, and I think it's Apple TV combined every evening. So for me, I go, your forecast for 2023 is, it becomes the idea we need to start listening to what's been said time and time again. Don't make ads, create value, entertain, and make content that audiences actually want to consume. Brands built on social, because that's where the conversation is happening. It's where culture unfolds, and it's where everything's talked about. And that includes brands. And that's where the audience controls where they want to watch, what they want to watch, and what they want to engage with. So it's, entertain, engage, be authentic. Because if you create value, that value is central to the conversation about your brand. So that means letting influencers talk to their audience their way and be their partner versus treating them like someone that's working for you.
Right. Yeah. So when you said, more people are watching TikTok now more than Netflix, I'm kind of guilty of that, so
yeah.
So
there's more time spent on it than like
yes,
5
it's
other platforms combined. So
with TikTok, it's really changing the game, right? So I like how you said that you have to treat influencers as an extension of your creative department. So I think you're hitting quite the same ground here with Isabel, that for you to be able to deliver content that would resonate with audiences, it has to reflect first within the collaborative relationship that you have to, again, it has to be like a partnership with them. You don't give them scripts, give them inspiration. That's a really good insight. So moving on to Ruben, right, who I think has been there and done that. So HP ANZ has had a handful of experience when it comes to influencers. You have an earlier marketing campaign this year that you've partnered with an artist to showcase the HP's printing quality. I think it's the ink subscription, right? So could you tell us more about that campaign, and how did you incorporate KOS as part of that strategy? And how did co-creation and social strategy help you in reaching the goal for this campaign?
Yeah, sure. So firstly, thank you for having me on this very timely discussion. I think influencers come up a lot, whether it's from the agencies or brands. And I think even social users know, they're pretty savvy these days on who's an influencer and who's not, right? So I think really timely. The first thing for us is really just determining the social strategy, and I think being really clear on what the objective was. And so we knew to drive our new product, which is HP Instant Ink, it's a subscription service, we knew we had to drive people to talking about print in the social sphere. And let's be honest, it's a pretty hard discussion sometimes, right? Not everyone's thinking about it. So we wanted to be super creative. We wanted something that would pop off the screen. We wanted something that would be able to break into some new family and friend networks, get people commenting and sharing and tagging and that sort of thing. So that's kind of what drew us towards Mulga, who's the Sydney artist that we worked with. He is a real creator. He does murals, he does artworks around Sydney and probably other Australian cities. And he created some really awesome animal characters for us, both in Australia and in New Zealand. And then we worked with our agency to actually animate them into videos, cut them into different formats, whether that's memes, polls, competitions. So we really looked at how people were using the platform, mainly Facebook and Instagram for this campaign, and how quickly they were absorbing that content. That also informed how many variations we did. So we did over, I think, 15 to 20 variations of creatives. Not all of them worked. We tested some and we pulled them down as soon as we realized they weren't working. We optimized others. So the co-creation process, I would say, is something that you've really got to understand what you want to achieve from the creator and the brand, and also understand your audience. Don't try to force something on the audience, because they're going to see straight through it as an ad. Now, we were able to get a pretty strong brand uplift in a short amount of time. In about 6 months, we got a plus 11-point uplift. So it does work. I'd say is influencer marketing does work, but understand that it's short-lived. So you've got to think about what's next as well, just so you can have that continuity. I think the guys spoke about the squad, super important. So that's just something that's part of your social strategy going forward as well.
Yeah, so I actually visited your YouTube channel, right? And I really think it's a really, really great campaign, spectacular creatives, and I think it's really just engagement at best, because you really kept it to 15-second ads, right? So moving on to Aaron. Hi again, Aaron.
Hello.
So Vamp is an end-to-end influencer marketing platform, and it's home to a global network of more than 45,000 creators. So with a demand for KOS, again, continue to evolve. So how does co-creation social strategy fit in, and where have your brand clients found success in this?
Yeah, so I actually think the co-creation stuff is probably some of the most exciting part of like that campaign activation. So it's something that we have seen a lot of, and it's something that we allow for in our technology. So we allow for it on a survey function where effectively the brand can then brief out to the creators on our platform. They can then crowdsource for campaign ideas that they can integrate into their overall campaign activation. So that's one component. And then, just to kind of piggyback on what Ruben's been chatting about, like we've seen brands, for instance, like in the publishing category, jump on the back of like trend jacking through TikTok co-creation. So they're using collaborations with like illustrators and designers to collaborate on book cover designs. And then even at Vamp, I kind of touched on the Azoo stuff, which was co-creation, where effectively, the brand was then reusing and repurposing the assets. But we did a campaign for Park Hotel Group in Singapore, where they relaunched their website a few years back. They engaged Vamp creators to go to 7 of their different properties and shoot the properties. And then that content then was integrated onto their new website when they launched it, which is really, really cool. And then we see activations like Johnny Walker, which was in Malaysia, where they were trying to raise brand awareness for a new black label, I think it was like sherry finished highball drink. And effectively what they were doing was saying to the creation to come up with your own recipes to showcase the drink, which is really, really cool. So there's lots of different ways for co-creation, but everyone's kind of been talking about it today. It's really around that relaxing the creative reins. So giving a bit of an overarching framework, but allowing the creators to produce and have that creativity when it comes to producing the content and showcasing the brand to their communities.
Yeah, you mentioned repurposing content, so it's just bizarre to know that you can actually repurpose content as long as the content is in the right direction, right? And we would like to focus now on the saturation of Me Too content. So I'd like to go back to Isabel. So L'Oreal is among the top brands in the cosmetics industry, and the beauty community has really boomed, right? There's a lot of smaller, independent, and new brands coming to the market. So as it becomes highly competitive and crowded with more brands, so what content strategies do you think make your consumers go, say, Me Too, and help you stand out when launching product?
Firstly, the approach should always be consumer first. And I know that's going to sound like a very taken for granted statement. But to be very honest, this is something that we also internally need to constantly remind ourselves. It's only been a couple of years, call it, since we've started this transition from coming into the conversation with our creators and our influencers as brand first versus consumer first. It used to be like, I had a product and I want to launch it, and this is what you're going to talk about, right? And that's going to get you maybe, let's say, 2 weeks worth of content, but it's not going to be able to have a very sustainable and engaging in the long-term relationship with the consumers who live in these spaces. And so we need to go back to the fundamentals of marketing, which is really to start with the consumer. In this space, in this influence and creator space, it also means first understanding the landscape, meaning what are the platforms that your consumer is in, and in these platforms, who are the tribes? Who are the tribes in terms of the the spaces, the conversations, the passion areas that are present. What are the content themes? Anyone who's on TikTok will know, that there's a bunch of different hashtags under beauty. So there's skin talk, there's hair talk, there's derm talk. There's so many talks, and there's a lot more, smaller spaces of really passionate tribes around these content themes. And then you figure out, in these spaces, which are then, the right KOLs, the right influencers that have the clout, the audience, and the authority in these spaces. And which spaces do the brands want to engage and have conversations with, which makes sense from a brand imagery, from a brand equity, and from a brand positioning standpoint, to then sort of narrow down what are the right spaces to enter, and who are the right KOLs to partner. And of course, it's important that there's always a layer of brand safety and internal controls in terms of making sure that you vet all of your KOLs. But at the end of the day, it's less about maximizing the reach, but rather finding the right tribes. Because, and I think we've alluded to this in the conversations earlier. It's always easier to amplify anyway via boosting with paid media, whatever is the best performing content. So it's easier to boost than to it's easier to boost a material that's already good than to start the other way around. So it's a shift in steps also from what marketers may have been used to in terms of how we used to plan for paid media. Another point that I would say is to, and this has been, I think, repeated quite a lot, but I think it does bear repeating because it does require a mindset shift from all of us, is to really strongly leverage your content creator partners, because at the end of the day, they're the ones who have the relationship with their followers. So they will know better than you what is relevant to their audience. So we really, really need to be ready as a brand to let go of the brand in many ways, so that these creators can take your message and make it their own. And the brands will have to be, comfortable with that. What that gives you in terms of payout is it will greatly enable you, the brand, to stand out in these platforms, especially again on platforms like TikTok, whose algo is really driven by the content itself, i.e., what content is best performing. And the last point I shared here is to really always listen. And this requires that even the members of the brand team, the marketing team, your social team, to be immersed enough in this space that you can identify in a timely fashion if there are opportunities to, for example, trend jack. Or to amplify what's already starting organically. Like, let's say you see a content creator doing a day in the life, and they somehow manage to mention your brand in a very positive way, done purely organically. That's an opportunity for you to see if there's something to be amplified there. And there's a lot of good examples of executions like these that are already in the market.
Yeah, so I like how you mentioned that brands need to let go. So it's like there's like a paradox there. So brands need to step up by letting go, right? And you mentioned quite a number of times the word tribe. So this is really what KOLs are giving life to. How about you, John? On the agency side, I have the same question for you. So what are some of the content strategies that have helped stand out for your consumers or for your brand partners when working with them? And what are some of the trends that you think will perform best in the coming year?
Well, I think from a content strategy perspective, I think for me, the keyword speed. And look, that comes from the fact that, brand is built on social these days. At VaynerMedia, we're obsessed with audience attention and the drivers of the consumer attention. And that can be cultural signals, it can be audience behavior, platform evolution, and everything in between. And that's what helps you move at the speed of culture. You got to move quickly, we make strategic organic creative for many different audiences. And when something resonates, as was said before, you build on it, you create bottom-up content that's built for real audiences. And this helps you move at the speed of culture. With, as I said, speed becomes the key strategy, because that's how influencers behave. They move quickly and they react to trends. They react to what will resonate with their own audience, and they do it at speed. They have that advantage, right? They don't have a lengthy approval process that gets in the way of them creating their own content. They just see a trend, they react to it, and the content goes out fast and it's relevant. And their audience sees that, and that's what gains their attention. So the key for me is always going to be, how can we get out of the way as much as possible from a process perspective to enable this behavior while ensuring that we're meeting, business objectives. So to enable this, it's that relationship between, and the partnership that becomes really key. So how do you set up your influencer relationships to enable them as brand partners who can able to react and create based on real cultural signals and trends at speed, before it's too late, because audience attention disappears very quickly. And I think one of the trends that for me that I think is really interesting in the coming year is actually the role of search within influencer content, because there's a really interesting shift in the sort of perspective of social platforms that, they're now being treated as search engines. 40% of Gen Z are saying that they now use TikTok as their primary search tool. And you go, that means that's a really different shift. If that's how they're wanting to source and gather information, and YouTube Shorts, as an example, it's really interesting as a short form video platform because it's built on top of basically the world's biggest search engine. So in this, if you're looking at, it comes back to speed again, because if you're able to create content fast that enables like that real-time search, for example, if you're using YouTube Shorts to find the best place to eat in a given area and being served results that were literally shot that day, that becomes really interesting. It becomes a really interesting way to use it as that tool.
I think this is really becoming the important takeaway here with our discussion, that it's really important that you give the creators the autonomy and the freedom to really explore their advocacy and their message, in relation to the brand. And as you've said, what a novel term, speed of culture. So it's very important that since our attention span has really, it has really shortened in the past years, it's very important that we're also agile and speedy when it comes to delivering our content. Yeah, so going back to Aaron, so I also have quite the same question, and I want to know the perspective of someone from a tech enabler. So from Vamp's features of casting influencers to content planning, so do you think are the crucial points that brands need to know with the goal of revamping their content strategies this coming 2023?
Yeah, sure. So I think some key things would be, and some stuff I mentioned in the presentation, first of all, like test and learn, be bold, experiment with different narratives and different creators. So some of the stats that I mentioned earlier around 91% of 18 to 25-year-olds don't believe that mainstream popular culture exists and subcultures are where it's at. So ensure you're building your creator squads with this in mind. The other part that I kind of mentioned as well is around the adding the media component to activations to extend the reach of campaigns. So give you a bit of an example, we did a campaign for Ted Baker up here in the UK, obviously, which is a big fashion brand. We did kind of like a 3-phased media boosting strategy for them. So it was basically amplifying the organic content beyond the immediate audience, obviously, of course. So phase 1 was drive mass awareness. Phase 2 was drive website traffic. And the third push was to target audiences to encourage purchases. I've actually got some really good stats here, which I'll kind of just read through. But the overall campaign generated 6 million aggregate reach across organic and boosted creator content on Instagram. The content was viewed 511,000 times by unique users. Total impressions were 578,000, generating 63,000 engagements. So you can see that, like, once you're kind of taking that initial cohort of the organic content and then boosting it beyond that, you can really get some amazing stats. So I would say that those are some of the things that I would do: test and learn, adding the media component, and then really strategizing on the content. I mentioned like some of these brands that are using and repurposing the assets. I think, doing that ahead of time, instead of waiting for the campaign to finish, think about where those assets could live as part of that planning stage.
Right, yeah, kind of in line with what Ruben was saying a while ago, that there has to be continuity. You can't just, even if a campaign works, as you've said, you also have to be already working on the next one, because the attention span again of the consumers really have become sped up. Yeah, so wrapping up this panel, I'd like to go to Ruben. So I just want to ask you, so influencer marketing, it's usually used or strategized for branding and of course for conversions, but we can see a lot of creator campaigns and also brands moving into using that as part of their advocacy-oriented initiative, something that Aaron has touched on in his presentation. So in your point of view in HP, why is it important to participate in these initiatives, and how is this integrated into influencer marketing strategy?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think the first thing to remember is you're always marketing to people. So, the person on the other end of the device is a real person. And if you start treating them that way and you start understanding the influence or the ambassador you're working with and what they're going after, it leads you to one place. It means authenticity, and you've got to be authentic with influencer marketing. Otherwise, it doesn't come off very well. It comes off, it doesn't perform at all. So I think we go through a pretty stringent process of choosing our ambassadors. We work with our agencies to do that, and then of course we work with them long term as well. I think Aaron mentioned at the start of the call, sometimes it doesn't work out, and that's totally fine, but you've got to have your criteria in place of what is performing and what's right for you, and then kind of move forward from there. I think the other thing that we find is that influencers allow us to tap into new spaces. And I think Isabel touched on this as well, whether that's new experiences, a new subculture or a theme that you're trying to get into, whether it's just going after a particular creative style or tapping into a global movement. Those are all things that you can do by testing that in the influencer and ambassador space. And if it works for you, then you can quickly scale it to something else and into a broader campaign, into a full brand piece of work, whatever it might be. So it allows a brand to become pretty dynamic. And I think that's whether you're a big brand or a small brand, you can kind of get that benefit, which is great. And the last thing I would say is you've got to remember that people are very good at just blocking out stuff these days. And so back to my point before about innovating, just because you've tested something and it performed this quarter doesn't mean it's going to perform next quarter. So always thinking about what is the new thing, the trend jacking kind of opportunities. Social's a very quick beast. So you've just got to stay on top of it and plan to do that as well.
Yeah, I think what I'm getting with you here is that you just have to be bold with your creative and influencer marketing campaigns, and you have to reiterate and test them for you to get it right with your brand and your strategy, right? So, all right, thank you so much to each of our panelists. What a great discussion. I really think very, very well represented, from different industries and also from different sectors here. So allow me, panelists, to proceed to the Q&A section. This is not addressed to anybody, so anyone from the panelists can answer. So would you agree that there's a steep decline of influencer marketing compared to the previous years, and what would be the future of influencer marketing, and will there be a need to innovate? I think Isabel, I'd like to give this to Isabel because this is something that you've discussed at the beginning of your
No, right. Which is why I mentioned earlier that it would be interesting to find out and discover a bit more like what the industry or category the person who asked that question was working on, so that we understand further the context of the question, maybe diagnose it a little bit better, because from all of the points that we see in the category where L'Oreal plays in, which is in beauty, which is based on various third-party research, is either the top one or the top two category that's driving the influencer space, and it's growing fast. We don't see that trend at all, and so it would be, I am personally interested actually to find out what category that is, so that it's something to understand further, to understand further on why.
Yeah, I do have the same thought. Whoever you are, maybe you could come forward and really want to know your thoughts on this, because influencer marketing is really nothing but just booming, right? So so there's this question for John. So interesting trends for next year, and I would like to check how's live streaming outlook next year, especially in a country that with a growing digital economy like Indonesia and Vietnam. Yeah. I think
I think look, just to jump on what Isabel was saying, what we've noticed too is, and what most of the sort of data and stats that I've read, is that influence is still a growing industry, and it's growing more and more. What the big change has been is if you went back 3 or 4 years ago, a lot more of the spend was on Facebook. Then 2 years ago, a lot more was on Instagram, and now it's being split more. TikTok's taking a lot more of the spend, and then there's all the short form video is really taking off, and that's becoming more and more. So it's less these days about getting people to do a static post on their profiles, on their platforms, and more a lot more video content being created, which is exciting. And So there does seem to be a steady growth. It just seems to be split across the platforms more. TikTok's really eating into a lot of the other platforms from a spend perspective on influencer stuff. And look, I've said this previously, I wouldn't sleep on YouTube Shorts, right? YouTube Shorts is actually the platform that is monetized the best if you're a creator. So as that picks up and gets more and more attention, you'll see a lot more creators using it because they make more money from it. So yeah. Now, I think with live streams, look, I'm a big fan of live streams. We've done several kind of quite large ones. We had John Legend performing live in a live stream we did for SK2 recently. And, I like making them. They're fun to make. There's a lot of adrenaline and sort of, you're on the spot a lot. The key thing is just don't make live streams just for the sake of making live streams, just because you're trying to tick that box because you think it should be done. Really look at the audience that you're trying to talk to. And if their behavior and their sort of consumption is that they really engage in live streams and that's where they spend their attention, then yes, go and make live streams. And, I think the key thing for me is always, what's the value for the audience about attending a live stream? If they're going to take time out of their day to spend an hour watching live stream, what value are you giving them? How are you making it worth their time? So it comes back to the thing of like, is it entertaining? Is it engaging? What value do they have? And also, it becomes that thing of what makes it that must-watch thing in their calendar to go, I'm going to dedicate this part of my day to spend in front of a screen live. So you have to have that, what's that hook to get them in and what's the value for them? So live streams, there seems to, if you look in China, the, live stream, especially from a e-commerce live stream perspective, it's grown and grown and grown, and it's become sort of a behemoth there. And it's slowly getting a bit more uptake in this part of the world. But I think it's, it's fundamentally like audience first. If your audience's behavior is, hey, they consume on live stream, they consume live streams, that's what they love and they're passionate about, then it's, then go and make live streams by all means. And I think that also comes back to, I saw there was a question in the chat about what type of brand should market themselves on LinkedIn. And I think it's really like, if the audience you're trying to reach, if their behavior pattern and their attention is focused on LinkedIn, then that's the platform you should focus on. But if they're not, there's no point just going, hey, we need to have a presence on LinkedIn just for the sake of it, because it's wasted energy. So it's really finding where your audience, we like to dig in past just like your top line audience and really dig into cohorts, or as Isabel was calling them, tribes, and really dig into like what's those micro audiences and what's their behavior, what platforms they live in, what do they consume, and then that's where you target your strategy from if you're doing a live stream or if LinkedIn is the platform that you want to focus on, and match their behavior. Because if that's who you're trying to talk to them based on where they put their attention.
Yes, live streaming is really becoming a favorite amongst consumers, right? Again, going back to that attention span that has really changed over the past periods with these different trends. So John and Isabel was able to already share their insights on the question. So I'd like to throw this one now to Ruben. So how important are the environmental, social, and corporate governance within your KOL strategy, meaning sustainability part of your success metrics? I think this is a really apt question for you, Ruben, because this is how we wrapped up the panel a while ago.
Yeah, I think everyone is trying to move into this space, and there's a lot of brands that are doing it the right way, and there are a lot of brands that are doing it the wrong way. But there's the purpose-driven marketing has seen a rise, right? And so finding the right place for your brand and making sure it's rooted in actual operational things that you are doing and you have been doing. So for example, we speak about recycling a lot because we have had a long-standing operational and supply chain management process, which allows us to recover plastics and things like that. And so we tend to talk about that and not other specific topics. And so it's kind of uncovering what your value proposition is in that space, and then talking to whatever your ESG kind of requirements are. I think greenwashing is the one thing that nobody wants to do. And so kind of steering clear of that is the main objective.
Right. I think it's just a natural evolution that influencer marketing is strategized as part of your sustainability marketing, right? Because it's really, that's the content creator there. They have their own advocacies, and it's always a good opportunity to really combine that with the brand. Yeah, so wrapping up this Q&A section, Aaron, if it's okay with you, I'm just going to throw in my own question. Right. So in this discussion, there's been so much said about, letting go of the rigidity that you have with influencers so that they could be able to really deliver well with their messages and their creatives and their content. So do you think now the brands are at the mercy of influencers? And is this a good or a bad thing?
I would say that the mercy of influencers, I think it just becomes a more even playing field. I think brands obviously respect what creators can bring to the table. And I think obviously creators kind of respect the fact that working with big brands is exciting. It helps, engage their audiences better. So I think there's benefits on both sides. But I think for the way that creator marketing is going, it has to be authentic. That's really important. And I think that co-creation level allows for that. Of course, brands want to set guidelines. That's totally understandable. But I think when it comes to like artistically directing content and kind of, putting, I guess, what brand guidelines would be into like the influencer channel is where it kind of can go wrong. So that's where we sort of say to the brands, build that framework and have like an overarching kind of theme for the campaign, but allow for creativity within that process. I think is really, really important. So yeah, and I think that's actually the co-creation stuff is the most exciting. Like I said, Ruben touched on it before. Like I think when you're working with creators who can add that really exciting piece of co-creation to your brand and get the message across into social, which generally brands see their brand in a way that they may never have seen before. And I think that's the exciting element of creator marketing. Yeah, that's definitely what I would say with that co-creation piece and relaxing the creative reins. I just think it's a really important piece. And I think that's what will give the creator marketing longevity as well.
Yeah, so thank you so much, Aaron. That wraps up our panel discussion for today. So, we have learned so much from our marketing leaders for today and what we can expect from influencer marketing this 2023 and beyond. So again, thank you so much to Ruben, Isabel, Aaron, and John. So we began the discussion with the goal of uncovering what the creator economy has in store for us in the next periods, and the insights that you've shared have definitely given us the solutions and how to respond to the new challenges presented in this area. So we are definitely much more confident to face the new phase of influencer marketing, and I am sure our audience as well will now be ready to incorporate KOLs as an essential component of their brand's omni-channel marketing strategies. So as we conclude this webinar, we would like to thank Vamp, who's been our partner for this event. So thank you so much, everyone. And once again, my name is Shaina. Until our next conversation.